Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome. We're going to let folks trickle in a bit. Welcome to today's Founder Series with the New York Tech Alliance, or Founder Spotlight. All right, I want us to get started on time, so I'm going to dive right in. This is also being recorded and you can watch the replay on YouTube. Hey, everyone that's watching on YouTube right now. My name is Georgianne Gettin, and I'm the CEO and founder of GSD Solutions. We are a business development agency that specializes in execution and productivity. I'm also a board member of the New York Tech Alliance. Today, I'm going to be having a great conversation with Genevieve, who is the CEO and founder of Real World. And I can't wait for you guys to dive in and learn a little bit more about her company and what they do. But first, a few notes. What happened to my slideshow? A few notes from the New York Tech Alliance. So when you came into this meeting, it notified you that we are recording. So we will be taking photos and videos and audio recording during this session. You will have an opportunity to unmute later and interact and do a Q&A if you're in the live session. If you're watching the replay, again, hey, everyone on YouTube. As well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are New York Tech Alliance when you go on to youtube.com. So a little bit more about the New York Tech Alliance, what we do and who we are. So our community and our network is all about connecting founders, entrepreneurs, students, government leaders, LGBTQ communities, Black and Brown tech communities, and just working all around the globe specifically, but starting from New York, to impact the thriving and amazing tech community that we have. And so we've been around for 10 plus years, and we continuously want to create impact in the world and in the New York tech ecosystem. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or connect with myself or Doug, who's currently the interim executive director of the New York Tech Alliance. Hey, Doug. We want to say a very amazing thank you to all of our annual sponsors, some amazing companies that are working to help us achieve our missions and put on sessions and experiences like we are doing right now. So definitely really grateful for our partners and our sponsors, and I can't wait to continue working with them. Our next event is actually going to be in person. So if you are here in New York, you can meet us, actually dual, hybrid, in person and virtual. We're going to be doing an event or monthly meetup. It's going to be at Northwestern Mutual, and it's going to have 5 different demoers: Killer Snails, Muse, ATL Hub, GeoCloud, Cap3 Collective, and it's going to be hosted by the amazing Doug. And so join us if you are here in person in New York City, and if not, definitely join us online. It's going to be happening on December 5th. And our next Founder Spotlight is going to be happening a week after that on December 14th, where I'll be back and I'll be featuring Eugenia this time from Jaquila Light. So we can't wait to have those amazing opportunities, and definitely check out all of our upcoming events at nytech.org/events. And just some community guidelines and community rules, as well as asking for support here. To support the New York Tech Alliance, you want to head on over to nytech.org/support_NYTA. We're always welcoming donations. When you register from one of our virtual events, you could become an individual or supporting or corporate sponsor, or just make a small donation for us to keep on putting on programming like this and engaging the tech community. And without further ado, I cannot wait to get started with my conversation with Genevieve. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides. And while I have Genevieve coming up, I want to ask you all, right? So we're going to, you know me a little bit, you know Doug, and you're going to get introduced to Genevieve in a second, but who are you? So a poll should have just popped up on your screen, and you can vote, are you a founder, future founder, investor, techie, or other? And if you meet in that other category, just go ahead and put into the chat what part of that other category you identify as for the work that you do. So we're going to take a second to do that poll. I see we have, Techie is in the lead, which makes sense. We are the New York Tech Alliance. And we have a couple others, founders in second place. So we have a few people that haven't responded. Take another 30 seconds to respond to the poll, and then we'll share the data. But again, I have with me the amazing Genevieve, who is the CEO and founder of Real World, a platform to help you navigate adulthood and its life moments. Genevieve is a lawyer by trade, and then she has transitioned into the tech ecosystem. So Genevieve, I would love for you to give us a little bit of a deeper introduction about who you are and the work that you do at the Real World. At Real World.
Thanks so much, Georgie. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming today and for including me in this. It's great to be here with you guys. So, first, we have a poll. Do you want to tell the results, Georgie, and then I can dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have techie as 46% of our audience today, founders as 31%, future founders 8%, and we have 15% as other. So we can't wait to see in the chat who some of these other are, but I'll pass it right back to you, Genevieve.
Amazing. Well, so as Georgie mentioned, Genevieve Bellaire, I'm the founder and CEO of Real World. We're a one-stop shop to navigate adulthood and big life moments. And what that means for us is essentially providing a simple and streamlined way to navigate your finances, healthcare, taxes, employer paperwork, all of the life stuff that you never likely learned in the classroom. I certainly didn't, but that you need to know to be successful in the real world. Hence the name Real World. So my background is in law. I'm a lawyer by trade. I got my JD MBA right after I graduated from college. So I had an amazing opportunity in terms of education, but I found that I was sort of delayed almost at entering the real world and entering the workforce because of all of that time in an academic setting. And so when I began my first real job, I realized pretty quickly that despite all of that, I had not learned a lot of these practical real world skills. So whether that was figuring out my own finances and credit cards, or whether that was 401k paperwork, health insurance, like all of these different decisions you have to make in your early 20s and beyond, were all really sort of new to me, which was a frustrating experience, I think, for everyone. It was particularly frustrating for me because I had spent so much time in school and felt that, you know, as a lawyer and as sort of someone who was credentialed at that point, like I should know these things. And so the more that I asked around, the more that I realized pretty much everyone goes through this rite of passage where like you graduate from high school or college, you enter the workforce, and all of a sudden you go from having a very defined path of take this test, get this grade, you know, sign up for this thing, to like open road. And it's a very challenging sort of life moment to sort of get set up in adulthood. So what we do is we provide that single point of entry to almost onboard you into life after school, set up the accounts you need, make sure we almost like audit your personal finances, your health and wellness, like make sure you go to the dentist, get a primary physician, all of that life stuff, and then provide one place to almost organize those things as well, so that you're constantly staying on track, whether it's tax season, open enrollment, paying rent every month, sort of keeping everything together.
Yeah, that is definitely really essential because, you know, it seems like a lot of people would, you know these things. And I hear like, I know millennials, we joke about it all the time, like, our parents knew how to adult better than we did.
Yeah.
But, you know, they had, you know, various things, maybe even like home ec or different courses at school that would allow for some of these teachings. So tell me a little bit more about the process of when did you realize you had to be the one to solve this problem? Like, you know, you could have been, you know, stayed in legal, but you're like, no, I have to commit and I have to found this company.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was sort of a crazy kind of timing situation, I suppose, in the sense that, so after I graduated from school, I began my career at Goldman Sachs. So I was a lawyer, but I was also doing more like business, sort of financial oriented work. And I came up with the idea for this company on my first week at Goldman because I was handed all the paperwork. I was handed the 401k stuff, the health insurance, like all these things were happening at once. But I obviously wasn't just going to like leave the company and go start this. But it was one of those things that was sort of always in the back of my mind that first year when I was there. And I would talk to more junior analysts. I'd talk to people who were just younger than me or same age as me, and kind of like sneak it into the conversation. Like, so how did you like figure out what credit card to get? Or, you know, there's three health insurance options at Goldman. Which one did you pick? And a couple of light bulb moments were every person I spoke with, like literally every person I spoke with, chose the middle plan. And I was like, why did everyone choose the middle plan? And I started to realize that no one wants to spend the time going through all the plan documents, understanding deductibles, premiums, like really sort of getting a better sense as to which one might be right for them. It's just such a friction-filled process that they just sort of pointed and clicked. And then I have two younger siblings. And so I was constantly getting, the oldest child was constantly getting like questions about this stuff from them as they were graduating and starting out. So it was kind of like all these things moving together in one, just that there's clearly a problem space here. And then what ultimately compelled me to leave and to start this was two things. One is from a market perspective, it was kind of an interesting time to be looking at this space because real world as a product doesn't really have a competitor, even to this day. There's lots of products and services that support around finances or health or meditation or insurance or any of these sorts of tools. And there's so many of them, actually. It's been a proliferation of products over the last decade. But the challenge with that is that as a consumer, it's very hard to understand how all those things fit into your life and like how they talk to each other. What are the questions you should be asking? And so there was an opportunity in the market to create that almost like place that you go to start to then learn about the different services that are out there and ultimately build the hub for all of those different pieces of knowledge, tools, resources, et cetera, in one place. So the market was sort of calling to me in that way. And I think the second thing was that actually having a background in law and in finance was really helpful for this space, because if you think about a lot of the decisions you have to make as an adult, a lot of them are like legal oriented, financial oriented, or everything from just understanding your own finances to, 529 plans if you have a child and sort of figuring out all of those kinds of things, trust and estates, wills, etc. So I think the training that I got in law school, specifically around breaking down large pieces of information into small, bite-sized, digestible, kind of like easily accessible nuggets, helped me be particularly well suited to start this business. So then I left and dived into this crazy real world landscape.
Nice. And I love that journey. Definitely can resonate with being oldest sibling. I get questions like this all the time. And because of the type of work that I do, people are asking me, I'm like, how do you think I know? But sometimes I do know. So, it's great that there's a resource kind of way like, hey, check out Real World. Like,
yeah, exactly. Send it to us. Perfect.
Yeah. And so, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that occurred while you were trying to build this business. So, you were at Goldman, you left, you said, yes, I'm going to commit. What was like that first thing that you did? And just what are some of like the growing pains that you had to proceed with, or was it smooth the whole way, right?
Definitely not smooth the whole way. I wish I could say that. Lots and lots of challenges. I think a couple that come to mind. So more from a like the landscape perspective. So as I was just mentioning, real world doesn't really have another like competitor. That market, it's a new category essentially. There's not another like adulthood platform, so to speak, which is really exciting, and it's the opportunity that we're chasing, but also actually makes it very hard to get started because you don't have another company to look to and say, oh, Headspace is doing a great job doing this for meditation, like, and I want to build a meditation app, so like let me see what they did well, let me see their business model, like what market did they go after, like all of that kind of stuff. And so from the beginning, it was kind of unclear, to be honest, even what type of product to build and what market to go after and how you would make money off of it and all of this sort of stuff. What was very, very clear was that there was a problem that was real and that there was a market who wanted something to solve that problem. But we had to figure out a lot of that stuff along the way. And we went through tons and tons of product iterations. We're still iterating today, to be honest, but we started with more of an education focused product because we thought, okay, biggest problem here is like people don't know what they don't know. So let's create a sort of one course or something that they can take that teaches credit, debt, taxes, student loans, like all of these sorts of things. And so our initial product that we launched with was actually a tool for schools, particularly colleges, to provide to graduating seniors as almost like the course you should have taken in college before you graduated. And we were very successful at that, which was terrific. We scaled it up to a bunch of schools across the country, but this was right around COVID time. And we actually had just gone through Techstars in New York, which was an amazing experience. And we sort of came to this realization that while we were making money, business was working, et cetera, it wasn't really solving the problem for a couple of reasons, which just wasn't what we wanted to do. We really wanted to solve this problem. And the first thing was that when you're working with schools, you don't have a direct relationship necessarily with your user. So that's point one. And point two is the person who you're reaching is still in school, they're a student. And what we thought was, okay, this is great. We'll prepare them to launch essentially into the real world. But what we didn't think about is that they're not really focused on the real world. They're really focused on like their studies and their friends and getting a job. Those are sort of the big things that they care about that senior year. And so all of a sudden, the market for us actually was like the post-grad experience and people in their early 20s and people who realized, just as many of you on this call probably do, like, oh yeah, I wish I had something like that when I was younger. And so we had to pivot our strategy to really focus instead on building a direct consumer product initially that was targeted towards people who had graduated and who were actually in the workforce dealing with these challenges day to day, so that we could be a resource that they realized was important to them, they realized they needed to know. So that was sort of the evolution. I can talk more about our product in a moment. I think the other big challenge, though, was actually being a lawyer. I thought being a lawyer, having an MBA, et cetera, that would really set me up for success as a founder. I'm not technical, which posed a lot of problems early, because I couldn't necessarily spin things up really quickly to test. And because our product really needed to be an iterative experience for us to figure out the right solution and get to product market fit, just went through so many different iterations of working with dev shops, like starting to bring on engineering talent on the team, and just wishing that I had the technical skills myself, frankly, and something like this, like a tech community that I could turn to ask questions and sort of have be part of that whole ecosystem. So I think those two were the biggest early challenges we faced.
Yeah, definitely could see how, having a tech community. So I've been in the New York tech ecosystem and community for like 10 years now. And just being able to I know a couple years ago, we had the meetup, when the meetup group was more popular on meetup.com, you could put a message into a forum and it would just email it to everyone. I got mentors from there, volunteers, just feedback on random things that I would put out. So, it definitely is essential. And we've evolved how we do that communication. I see that we have some questions in the chat. We are going to have some time in a bit towards the end where we're going to have questions. So definitely continue to put the questions into the chat, but I just wanted to address that. And now my next question is, so you're building out this product, you guys just finished Techstars, and now you've made that pivot. What was it like transitioning? What was it like in the early days once you switched from the B2B or, business to government model to the B2C model? Was it easy to find people? Was it difficult? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey when you were pivoting your business model.
Yeah, of course. So we still have always had, I should say, we have always had sort of a business to business lens as well. So we work with employers, for example, now to provide access to real world as a benefit to their particularly early career talent, but really anybody. The same way that a company like Headspace or Calm is a direct consumer product, but also has Headspace at work or Calm at work. Exactly. So there's always been that lens, which is great. But I think the biggest change for us was we had spent basically $0 on marketing. And to that point, because all of our growth had come from direct sales. We were reaching out to colleges, getting them on board, providing them with marketing materials, and then they would get their students on board. So when you have a direct consumer product, unless you've already built a community or you've built some, as an individual, if you have a large following or something else, you kind of have to put some money towards it just in the beginning to kind of get things going. And that was something that I really did not want to do in the beginning. It was a very frugal founder, raised limited capital, et cetera. Finally came around to the importance of building the brand and sort of building out people getting on the product, because frankly, we needed a lot of people to be on the product to keep learning from and then continuing to iterate on the product experience itself. So that was one of the earliest learnings, was you got to spend money if you're going to be a direct consumer product. And also when you go and fundraise, you're raising from different investors. They're focused on the growth metrics, they're focused on different consumer focused metrics as well. And that when you raise venture, a significant portion of that capital, unless you can create an amazing organic or viral growth strategy, is going to go to marketing. So that was one big thing. I think one of the most amazing things, though, that happened, which is what we were part of our intention, was that we learned so much more quickly, because we had 10,000 people using the product that we could learn from over the course of a month, versus working with schools and signing them up. And then, 3 months later, they implement the product and then getting feedback is sort of a slower process. So that was a helpful way for us to, I would say, 5 to 10x our speed in terms of learning, which is so critical in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, that speed is going to be essential to see, okay, does it work? Do we need to pivot? What do we need to change? Yeah. And so now I'd love to dive a little bit into the technology. You just mentioned that you are, do not have a technical background, and you've worked with engineers and folks overseas. And, what was that journey like? And what are some key highlights that you've discovered? Because I know, there are that the intake form that we did earlier, the poll said that the majority of the audience right now are techies, but there are many people that are not. And so, what are some key things that you learned in your journey to build the technology as a non-technical founder?
Yeah, of course. Well, maybe I can start with where we are today too, just to give you a little bit of context. So we now are fortunate to have an amazing engineering team in-house. We work with great engineering leadership, design leadership, product leadership, et cetera, which we've built over the last couple of years. But I think some of the things that I've had to learn along the way in terms of the I'd say process to get to product market fit and just that iteration around the technology sometimes is actually more on the design side than on the actual like engineering side. So I remember in the earliest days when we were building stuff, I would say like, okay, let's go build a prototype. Like, let's build something that actually works and like ship it and get it into market, et cetera. And I'd be working with initially like outsourced engineers and things like that. And the challenge, the problem with that I realized really quickly was one, back to speed of learning. That takes time to build a fully coded prototype, put it in market, like see what people are doing, all of that kind of a thing, and get feedback and then keep building off of it versus using Figma and creating a beautifully designed, but not functional prototype that you can put in someone's hands on their phone. You can have user testing conversations much more quickly without a single line of code being written. And so I think one of the big things I learned early was how important it is to actually start with design and really think about like an MVP, a minimum viable product, as an MDP, like it has to be minimally designed product, because particularly depending on who your audience is or who your target users are, and ours are Gen Z, like if it's not designed well, it's just not.
Yep.
And like you've got a couple of shots, maybe one shot to kind of get in front of them, short attention span. And so I think prioritizing, and I've since like learned a lot more about design and sort of gone deeper in that space, prioritizing the consistent and sort of small design iterations before handing off to engineering at all whatsoever in terms of new products or in terms of new concepts, et cetera, was something I had to learn along the way. Because my initial thought was, well, it needs to actually work for us to know if someone's going to want to use this thing. But I realize now that is not necessarily the case. And the great thing is that between Figma, Canva, I mean, all of these exist out there, even like Notion in some ways you could create Typeform, like you can use all these tools that are basically free to test a lot of this stuff before you actually commit dollars and time to building things, which is amazing because even a couple of years ago, that wasn't really the case.
Yeah, I love that, the MDP, minimally designed product. So guys, remember that, because we hear MVP all the time. And what I really like that you're mentioning is like a lot of these solutions that could get something up and running for even a person that's not super technical, or again, at a low entry cost. Being a frugal founder, that's another keyword that you said that I want to highlight, because people just want to go out there like, I need to raise money. Like I have this big idea, raising. We've seen dozens of companies that have raised millions, even billions of dollars, right? That have wasted it. Literally just goes away because they're not using that money strategically. You could, think of your idea of like, if I got $1 million tomorrow, how long would that last, right? Like, but what if I got 1 million users tomorrow? How long would that last? Like, what are you going to actually do with these things that you're building, and how can you test it fast, figure out what works, keep it, and then remove what doesn't work? So I love that you implemented a lot of these strategies to build your company. And so now I want to talk a little bit about your founder journey. So how does it feel to be a founder? And did you ever think that, when you were younger, that you would become a tech company CEO, a tech founder, and what has that, taught you about yourself and your experiences?
Yeah, it's such a fun question. So I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to go into public service. That's what I wanted to do. And I was a politics major in college. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Like that was the path that I'd really seen myself on. And when I was really, really little, I wanted to be like an architect. So kind of public service and architect. Obviously, neither of which I am doing today. But I think that what I realized from the early stages of this journey was that being an entrepreneur actually has like elements of both of those things, in the sense of like building something. Like architects build things, entrepreneurs build things, public servants ideally like lead people, sort of like collaborate with other people and sort of try and solve a problem in some way. And so I think like the things that ultimately drove me to entrepreneurship were probably things that were instilled like earlier in life. But I did not expect when I graduated from school to be here at all. I promised I would have taken a computer science class in college or something just to have given me a little bit more background in tech. But I couldn't be happier with where I feel like I landed. I think the exciting thing about being a founder, I know there's a lot of founders on the call, is that you are learning something every day. Like I've learned like 5 things already today. Like they're like making mistakes constantly. It's okay to make mistakes. Like it's just sort of a forward moving process. So I think what I enjoy about that versus other professional experiences I've had is that not everything is black and white, as opposed to something like law, where, it's like the letter of the law, you're arguing cases, et cetera. There's just so much room for creativity and for collaboration and to kind of push the bounds of what exists today. So I think that's what's been exciting. And I think the other thing that I've really reflected on over the last couple of years is how fortunate I feel to be a founder in the US, because if you look at lots of other markets across the world, which obviously are growing rapidly in terms of opportunities, the US is where like the capital is, where so much opportunity is for female founders. You have like the same opportunity as male founders. Like there's a lot of hindrances other places in the world that we don't have here. So I feel like very fortunate in that regard too, just to have landed in a place like New York that's like an amazing tech ecosystem that has strong rule of law, strong like protections for, IP, all sorts of things there, but also access to capital, access to talent, all that kind of a thing. So it's definitely been a journey of like challenging, but sort of very gratitude filled journey, I suppose.
Awesome. And just to poke in a little bit of fun, what was something along your journey as a founder that was like super unexpected? It could be one you were building the company that impacted the company, or something just like personal that you realized like, whoa, I didn't even think this was on the roadmap. Like, this is crazy. If you want to share one of those stories.
Let's see. I mean, one thing that I didn't realize more professionally was that I actually think being a lawyer made me seem less desirable as a founder, particularly to investors, which I would have thought the opposite would be true. Just, you're credentialed, like you spent all this time, et cetera. But I think lawyers are seen as risk averse, which most are. And to be a founder, you need to be like risk seeking, out there, kind of, always challenging things. And so I think there was almost some kind of like reframing in my mind I had to do when I was pitching, to lean a little bit less on the fact that I had that credential and a little bit more on the kind of like, but I've spent all this time getting to know the ecosystem and I can design stuff in Figma and like all of that. So that was interesting. In terms of the other things, I mean, one thing that I don't think I'd really considered was that so many of my close friends now are also founders, and they're people I've met along the way. So like Techstars, we talked about briefly, but for anyone who's not familiar with that program, it's a 3-month-long accelerator. Essentially, they have them all over the world, and you're put in a room normally, or a Zoom, I guess now with COVID, with like 10 other founders and their teams. And you go through this process together where you're learning about stuff, you're pitching investors, you're like building your product, et cetera. But I think I didn't realize how important it was to have those founders communities, and how much like many of my best friends now are people who've also started businesses, which was kind of like an amazing thing, because if you haven't built a company, it's sometimes really hard to talk about a lot of this stuff with someone who hasn't, just because there's so many ups and downs and it's kind of a crazy process. But I think those two things probably stick out in my mind in terms of like, this was an unexpected experience, but a good one.
Yes. And having founder friends and business friends, tech friends are definitely essential, because you can't just go in and talk to everyone and say, yeah, we just closed $1 million, but it's not enough, right? Some folks like, if you do not stop talking to me right now. But yeah, so I want to ask 2 more things before we open it up for some Q&A. So I want you to talk a little bit about your team. So you started mentioning a little bit about your community and your network, but what is your team like? And this can be your work team or just the people that you found essential to have around you as a founder.
Sure. So I think one of the most exciting and frankly most gratifying, fulfilling parts of starting a business is building your team, because you're basically, one, you're creating jobs for people, which is incredible. Like that's what entrepreneurs do every day. But 2, you're able to really build a culture and build a place where people like want to come to work every day. So that's definitely something I've spent a lot of time thinking about and trying to build in real world. And so we're a lean team. We're under 15 people still now. We've got kind of like leadership, I'd say, across every part of the business. So everything from like engineering to product to business development, marketing, et cetera. But we're lean enough where like people are still have a lot of hats on. And that's been sort of the moral of the story for early days founding, is like everyone's wearing a lot of hats. But I think the biggest things that have really been in my mind when building the team and hiring people are team players. So people who are not just in it for themselves, but very much in it to build with other people, because at this stage you have to have that like tight-knit, mission-driven culture. And then to that second point, having people who are really focused on our mission, which is like, our mission is to simplify adulthood. It's a very much a social impact oriented company. We believe we can change the way the next generation begins life, so to speak, change the wealth gap, like really kind of take on a lot of these systemic problems that we have just by educating people around the systems in which we operate. So people who are really grounded in that belief in education and sort of the mission itself. And then I think beyond and we have people who've been with our team for like over 3 years now. So like people who've really dug in, and lasted and built their career at Real World, which is exciting. But I think beyond the actual day-to-day operators, we have a strong network of advisors. We have 6 advisors who are operators, people who've built exciting businesses. We have an advisor who's a lawyer, the former CEO of Etsy. So like people who've been at different stages of companies and are able to provide guidance across, I'd say, a myriad of different things. So if I have like a sales focused question, I can go to one person, a community product oriented question, go to somebody else, etc. And then the last group, of course, is our investors. So we've been lucky to work with some amazing investors over the last few years. Some people who've been with us for like 3+ years, essentially since we started raising capital. And I think, the thing that I've been most appreciative about of them is having a long-term focus and sort of long-term view and sort of understanding of what we're building at Real World, so that our decisions that we're making now are really foundational to our success 5 years from now, being able to see a product that doesn't exist right now and sort of believe in our vision to be able to get there. So just long-term partners, long-term thinking across the team itself. But yeah, very mission driven and very, very hardworking.
Absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Sure.
And so before we open it up for the audience's questions, I want to ask you, what is an ask that you have from the community, as well as something that you can offer to our community here?
Ooh, let's see. One ask is that our product is a subscription. It's an amazing subscription. It's an amazing gift around the holidays for anyone who's in your life, who's in their early 20s, trying to figure this stuff out. If you're interested, you can check it out just by going to realworld.co. If you're thinking about like a sweater or like helping them get their life together is always, in my book, the right gift. So that would be my ask. And then in terms of things I can give, and I've just learned so much during this process. I'm very open about like the failures and things that we've had along the way. So if there are questions you're working through, specifically if you're a founder, like feel free to reach out anytime. And I'm happy to help if I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us, Genevieve. And so we have a question from the audience, and it is, what specific tech skills do you wish you had? It's a 2-part question. So let's start with that one. What specific tech skills do you wish you had?
So we talked about this a little bit, but I think the design, like technical design and like prototyping would be my first skill I wish I had, in terms of being able to do a lot of that early user testing, product market fit kind of like work and analysis. Because I think the challenge was I had it all up here, but I couldn't like put it into something to be able to get true, meaningful feedback off of it. And when that is your situation, sometimes you can have, I did this myself, like leading questions for people, like, what if I showed you this versus here's this, what do you think? And so you can get like different types of feedback. So I think that was the first thing, probably, is just the design prototyping skills. But I think the second one, which is still something I wish I had more of today, is having enough of a sense in terms of the complexity of different engineering projects to know and prioritize how we think about building things on our team. So we have tons of ideas. We're like an idea factory at Real World. We have so many things we want to build, and we have great engineering leadership who can help us sequence and think through the right order to do things properly. But I think I would be an even more effective leader if I was able to say, okay, well, this project is super important, but I know it's going to take 6 months, and I'm willing to prioritize that. And it's a complex thing that we can sit down and do, versus, oh, this thing looks really simple, but talking to an engineer saying, no way, this is like super complex and it's going to take us a long time. So I think being able to have more realistic product road mapping experience would be helpful.
Yeah. And then the second part of that question you kind of answered was, how do you think it would have specifically helped you? So just being able to understand like the bigger picture and be able to support your team with the execution and building out the roadmap. So thank you. And then we have another question. How did you select your advisors, and are they paid? Ooh, this is an interesting one.
Good question, Doug. One other thing to add to Darius's question though, too, which is that I also think being technical would have helped from an investor perspective, like fundraising, because Investors love to see technical founders because they know that they can build without needing to hire more people. And
Mhm.
so if I had some more of those technical skills, I think we would have raised money more quickly, et cetera, et cetera. Just one other thought there. Advisors. So this actually happened more organically, and it all really started when we were in the Techstars program. So we had one person particularly who we met then in a very casual way, who just fell in love with real world. We like loved him. He was really helpful, offering his time, energy, et cetera. And once the program was over, we're like, how can we figure out how to keep working together? We want to make this, something where you feel vested in what we're doing and all invested in what we're doing and all of that. So we ended up bringing him on as an advisor. And then later we had, over the course of the year, essentially 5 other people who we ended up bringing on. They're not paid in capital, but they're paid in equity. So we built essentially there's a pretty standard agreement called a FAST agreement, which is like a founder advisor stockholder agreement. I can't remember what it is exactly. But we ended up doing a percentage that then vested over 2 years. And so they were in exchange, had consistent phone calls with us, would be like always open to making connections, be able to come in and do more of like a, sit down workshop oriented thing with our team as needed. So lending whatever skills that they had to the table.
Absolutely. And we have a couple more questions here. Someone is asking around the platform. So they said, if we have ideas for modules or items that could be included, how do we let you know at Real World? Do you guys have like a feedback form or something? Yeah.
Absolutely. You can email team@realworld at any point. We would love any feedback you have and or any ideas you have in terms of other content and topics. Our vision, I should say too, I didn't really talk about this, but our vision as we grow is to support through the full journey of adulthood. So not just like setting you up for success with the foundations and all of that, but if you're getting married or having kids or buying a house or a car, or you have aging parents and you're helping them sort of transition or whatever it might be, providing support and guidance through each of those different events. So would love any feedback or thoughts or anything at all.
Awesome. And yes, adulting, it just never stops, guys.
Doesn't get easier. Yeah.
Like life insurance and tax. I'm just like, can we just like automate it somehow?
I know.
Sounds like Real World is helping us, get our lives together. And then what another thing that I really want to highlight is the fact that you said a lot of these tools and solutions that we use, they don't talk to each other, which is complete madness, or they need things like facts. It's 2022, guys. Who's crazy? But I will not divert on my facts. my ideas. We have another question here. And if there's any other questions, we have a few more minutes, so please put them in the chat. So we have a question that says, any tips about fundraising and setting up a progress? And if you want to elaborate on what is that is Daria?
Process maybe?
Yeah, probably process. Anything that you did or changed that improved the efficiency and the process or made the opportunity more compelling. So just how did you look at fundraising and any just tools or resources that you used in the process to make it smoother?
Yeah, so I've raised a couple of rounds of we've raised a couple of rounds of funding now. It's definitely gotten the process gotten better and better every time, because I think you just learn more about what are the things to focus on, how to be more organized, et cetera. So I think the biggest insights I can probably share from my own experience, which is imperfect, but are be hyper organized ahead of time. Like the fundraise is actually like the month and a half before you start fundraising, in my opinion. It's figuring out who you're going to go and try and get in front of, who the right person is at the firms you're going to try and go to, who can introduce you to those people, what the compelling part of the pitch would be for them. And then having all of your materials, so everything from your deck, and you can have multiple types of decks, like a teaser deck that's just 1 or 2 things, 1 or 2 slides, just a little bit about the company, to much more elaborate with appendixes and all of that sort of appendices and stuff. Kind of a deck, your data room, like having everything super organized so that when you press go, like you are in control, you are in charge, and you're saying, I'm going to stack up all of these meetings over the next 3 weeks to basically get in front of everyone I want to get in front of, pitch 8 to 10 people a day, and just like get this done. Because the reality is, if you're spending 3 months, 5 months, 10 months fundraising, you're not building your business, and you're draining your energy, and you're also making your fundraise actually look less attractive to investors, because they're like, well, why hasn't someone already invested in this if it's been like 8 months and you're fundraising? So the more that you can set up yourself for success in the beginning so that you can have a true kind of just command over what is a very unruly and emotional process you're going through, getting, pitching, rejections, like all sorts of stuff constantly, I think is important. So a couple of tools that I've now used is Airtable for keeping track, like a CRM system to keep track of the people that I'm pitching, where they are in the process, like really running it like a sales process, to be able to say, okay, I've connected with this person, we've met, or we have a meeting scheduled, we have a second meeting scheduled, investment committee scheduled, whatever it might be, or they passed, and just making sure that there's a true kind of like place that you go to every morning that's like, this is where I'm spending my day, in this Airtable spreadsheet thing that's going to help me understand where to focus my time. And then second, making sure that you never run out of firms. So like every morning adding 10 to 15 new firms. There are hundreds, if not thousands, there's thousands of VC funds. And I think when you're in the fundraising mindset, you can be like, oh, like I've spoken to everyone, and I'm not getting in front of the right people, et cetera. But if you keep filling the funnel, you'll find the people who click with you. And all you really need is like one to say yes, give you a term sheet, the rest of the deal comes together, you're done. So I think the big things around staying organized, staying motivated, but just being like hyper focused on that process and getting it right in the beginning is important.
Georgie, can I jump in and just follow up on that point?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious, Genevieve, if you've used a platform like PitchBook to source data and source the investors that you were looking for.
Yeah, so we don't use PitchBook, but we do use Crunchbase. So kind of like same thing, I suppose.
Okay.
I don't know enough about PitchBook, to be honest, but use Crunchbase. Honestly, talk to a lot of those founder friends, like who have you worked with that you think is great, et cetera. Because the other thing too is taking money from investors, not just taking money, like you're building a partnership with them. Like ideally, this is one that will last 10 plus years if you're successful as a business. And so you really want to make sure that the same way that they're vetting you, you're vetting them in terms of the way that they work as an operator, the way that their firm works, like look at how they've worked with past companies, et cetera. So Crunchbase is helpful, I think, to just source the kind of like the first place to go to, but then from there, really understanding through their website, how they talk about, their mission and their ethos, et cetera, but also like talking to other founders who've worked with them. There's no better person to speak with than someone who's actually worked with them before. To kind of give you more intel there.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for that deep dive. And again, I just really want to highlight what Genevieve is saying about, being strategic, being focused, and knowing that the ball is in your court. Especially as founders, we may feel that, everyone else is fundraising, we have to fundraise, right? And then jumping into something that we're not prepared for. So, figuring out your story, like she mentioned, she realized that like highlighting her experience as a lawyer may not have been the best fit because of the business and, the business model that she had and the type of company that she had. So, adjusting how you tell your own story, adjusting how you use your resources instead of spending hundreds of thousands building the thing from soup to nuts. Start with Canva, start with Figma, start with a mock-up site, using Airtable, using a lot of these free or freemium items that you can get, like that MVP or that MDP, minimal defined product, going and setting that foundation. The next two questions are are both about your the business model and just how things are going to be going with Real World. So I want to ask these two questions, and then I want you to close us off with just kind of what's next and what's in the future for Real World. So the first question is, I'll ask both of them. So do you see this being introduced at the student level, whether high school or college? And then the second question is, how much is the annual subscription, and do you have pricing tiers for different modules?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first one. So yeah, absolutely. We want to work with schools again in the future. I think the high school level is challenging because one, there's so many high schools in the country. When you look at public versus private schools, it's a little bit easier to work with private schools because they make decisions independently about what products and services to use, but it's obviously serving a different population. It's not serving like the full population. And then within public schools, you're looking not just at like state by state, but like county by county, like town by town, essentially, in terms of making these different decisions. So we found just when we tested the waters a little bit, it's kind of hard to get up and running, but I think the product as early as possible as you can put it in the hands of someone, like before they're starting to make these decisions, particularly if they're going to go to college and, take on student debt, like get all these credit card offers in the mail, just be prepared around those sorts of things, the better. So yes, absolutely. And then colleges, of course, I think there's so much that we can do to help launch people effectively into life after school, or into grad school if they decide they want to go to grad school, or sort of just make sure that they have those different kind of options in front of them. Then in terms of the subscription, so it's $100 for the year or $10 a month. And there's no pricing tiers right now. We tried to just make it like very simple. And one of the reasons for that is that our mission is to simplify adulthood. So we try and make everything really simple. But the second is that like every month we're adding new content, adding new modules, adding new stuff into the platform itself, as well as like vetting products and services and tools that can be helpful. So everything from budgeting tools to meditation apps to things like ZocDoc that can help you book a dentist appointment. We're like constantly improving the product. So just want to keep it one place or one price for people to get it all essentially.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Genevieve, and having this great conversation for the New York Tech Alliance community. Folks, check out Genevieve as well as Real World on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on social media, interact, go to realworld.co. And we're going to put this information in the chat as well as in the follow-up email and also on YouTube in the description below. And thank you for being here, everyone that came live. Thank you, everyone that's watching on YouTube. Hey, YouTube folks. And we'll catch you next month for another New York Tech Alliance Founder Spotlight. If you're in New York City, join us in person or virtual on December 5th for our next in-person New York Tech Alliance monthly meetup. And that's it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.